They laughed at her. On a gray Saturday morning, at a dusty animal auction where unwanted dogs were sold for as little as $10, one German Shepherd mix stood perfectly still while buyers walked past, possibly blind. The auctioneer announced, "Useless." Someone muttered. No one bid, until a 10-year-old girl raised her hand. What nobody in that crowd knew, what even her parents didn't know, was that this wasn't just a blind dog. 8 months earlier, he had been pulled from something far darker than neglect. Something involving chains, concrete floors, and men who made money from blood. At exactly 40:37 p.m., on a frozen lake at a winter fair 3 hours from home, that same blind dog would make a decision that defied everything trauma had taught him, because when the ice cracked, when the water swallowed the girl whole, when the crowd froze in horror, the dog who couldn't see ran. Not randomly, not desperately, but with terrifying precision. So here's the question: how does a blind dog calculate distance across cracking ice? Why did he pretend not to see for months? And what happened in that hospital room later that night that made her father whisper, "He was never broken"? This isn't just a rescue story. It's about grief, guilt, and the moment a shattered heart decides to look up again. Because sometimes, the one everyone thinks needs saving is the one who saves us all. Stay with me. You won't forget this one. Stay with us because this story will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The countryside stretched endlessly, brushed in honey wheat and lavender skies that held their breath before sunset. At its heart stood a small cottage with chipped blue shutters and a stubborn garden still blooming against time. Inside, an old woman moved slowly through quiet rooms, humming as she stirred soup, her spotted hands steady with habit. On the porch, a dog rested his chin on crossed paws, watching her through the screen door with eyes deeper than loyalty, devotion. She called him Son, the word heavy with all the love she had left. Mornings were spent in the garden, evenings by the rocking chair as she read aloud, his breathing sensing with the creak of wood. Beyond the fence, the world felt unnecessary. Here there was belonging. Winter slipped in softly. Her cough grew from a whisper to a rattle, yet she kept moving, kept calling him Son, until one morning the house was too still. Neighbors found her in the chair, eyes closed. He nudged her cold hand, whining, refusing to leave until she was carried away. Days later, men smelling of smoke and cruelty dragged him into a blood-scented cage. As the truck pulled away, he looked back at the blue shutters, the last time he looked at anything with hope. The underground ring was a tomb of noise and violence. Concrete walls slick with moisture, dim bulbs swinging overhead, casting shadows that moved like ghosts. The air was thick with the stench of sweat, metal, and terror. Dogs barked in frantic bursts, their voices raw with panic. Chains rattled against metal poles. Men shouted bets, their voices sharp and greedy. And in the center of it all, under a single flickering spotlight, two animals were forced to destroy each other. He had been dragged into that circle on his second night. His paws barely touched the ground before the gate slammed shut behind him. Across the ring stood another dog, larger, scarred, eyes wild with something that wasn't courage but survival instinct weaponized. The crowd roared. Handlers yelled. And then the other dog charged. He didn't fight. He couldn't. Every instinct told him to run, to submit, to curl into himself and disappear. But there was nowhere to go. The first bite tore into his shoulder. The pain was blinding, white, hot, and absolute. He yelped, stumbling back, and for a split second, he looked up into the other dog's eyes. What he saw there shattered something inside him. Not rage, not hatred, just emptiness. A reflection of his own despair. The handlers beat him for not fighting back. They kicked him, dragged him by the collar, threw him into a cage so small he couldn't stand. Blood dripped from his wounds onto the cold metal floor. And in the suffocating darkness, he made a decision. He thought of the old woman. Her gentle hands, her soft voice. The way she looked at him with eyes full of warmth, full of life. And he realized something terrible. Seeing her had made him love. Loving had made him vulnerable. Vulnerability had led to this. So he stopped, not physically. His eyes still worked. But he stopped letting them matter. When the handlers dragged him out again, he kept his gaze low. When they shoved him into the ring, he stared at the ground. When the other dogs circled, snarling, he didn't flinch, he didn't look, and something strange happened. The crowd grew bored. The handlers grew frustrated. They labeled him broken. They called him defective. And eventually they stopped using him. He was thrown into a corner cage, forgotten among the others. Days bled into weeks. He ate when food was tossed in. He slept when exhaustion won. But he never looked up. Not at the other dogs, not at the handlers, not at the slivers of sky visible through the rusted roof. Because looking meant remembering, and remembering meant feeling, and feeling meant breaking all over again. When they finally dragged him out and dumped him on the side of a road, he didn't even lift his head. The world had taught him a lesson he would never forget. The only way to survive was to stop seeing it. By the time they labeled him, possibly blind, he had already decided the world wasn't worth seeing. The animal control van smelled like disinfectant and desperation. He lay in the back, his body swaying with every turn, his eyes fixed on nothing. When they pulled him out at the processing center, a woman with tired eyes scanned him with a handheld device, checking for a microchip that didn't exist. She wrote something on a clipboard. No ID. Possible visual impairment, malnutrition. Scarring consistent with fight training. The words floated past him like smoke. They meant nothing. He was led through a series of chain-link corridors, each one louder than the last. Dogs barked from every direction, some with hope, some with rage, some with the hollow sound of giving up. He was placed in a kennel near the back, the floor cold and hard beneath his paws. A metal bowl of water sat in the corner. He didn't drink. Days passed. Volunteers came and went, stopping at kennels, cooing at dogs who wagged their tails or pressed their noses to the bars. They walked past him without a second glance. He didn't move, didn't beg, didn't perform. When they opened his gate to check on him, he simply sat, staring at the wall. "Think he's blind?" one volunteer asked. "Or just given up?" the other replied. "Does it matter?" It didn't. The auction was held on a gray Saturday morning. Rows of kennels were wheeled into a dirt lot behind the shelter, each one holding a dog deemed unadoptable, through normal channels. Buyers walked the aisles, farmers looking for work animals, breeders looking for cheap stock, and occasionally someone looking for a project. He stood in his kennel, unmoving, as hands reached toward him, as voices called out. A man in overalls tapped the bars. "This one dead?" The auctioneer laughed. "Nah, just stupid. Possibly blind. Won't even look at ya?" The man moved on. Another buyer crouched down, studying him. "Shepherd mix. Maybe. Hard to tell under all that neglect. Any aggression? None. Doesn't react to anything." The buyer stood, shaking his head. "No point in a dog that won't work." And so it went. One by one, the other kennels emptied. Dogs were loaded into trucks, led away on leashes, carried in arms. The lot grew quieter. The auctioneer's voice grew hoarse. By mid-afternoon, only a few remained. He was one of them. The auctioneer sighed, wiping sweat from his forehead. "All right, last call. Shepherd mix, approximately 2 years old, possible blindness, no bite history. Starting bid $20. Silence, 15. Nothing, 10. The auctioneer glanced at his assistant. "Anyone?" Dust swirled across the empty lot, clinging to his paws like the weight of every moment that had led him here. He didn't care. He had stopped caring the moment they ripped him from the only home he'd ever known. The auctioneer raised his gavel. "All right. If no one, I'll take him." The voice was small, young, uncertain, but it cut through the silence like light through a crack. The auctioneer paused, gavel mid-air, and turned. A girl stood at the edge of the lot, one hand gripping her father's sleeve, the other pointing directly at him. "That one," she said again, louder this time. "I want that one." The auctioneer blinked. "Sweetheart, that dog's likely blind. He won't play fetch. Won't guard your house. Might not even know you're there." The girl didn't waver. Her eyes, wide and impossibly earnest, stayed locked on him. "He doesn't have to see me," she said softly. "I see him." And for the first time in months he lifted his head, not fully. Just enough, just a fraction. Just enough to let a single, pale beam of light touch the edges of his broken world. Sometimes the only person who sees you is the one who doesn't know what they're supposed to see. Her name was Emma, though she introduced herself to every animal she met before she introduced herself to people. She was 10 years old, with scraped knees perpetually decorated with band-aids and a backpack covered in pins shaped like paw prints. Her parents called her impractical. Her teachers called her distracted, but Emma called herself a listener because she heard things other people missed. The way a cricket's song changed before rain. The way her mother's voice softened when she was pretending not to be worried. The way silence could be loud when something hurt. That morning, she had begged her parents to take her to the auction. Not because she wanted a dog. She already had two at home, both rescues, both adored. But because her father had mentioned it in passing, said the shelter was clearing out space, and something in the way he said, "clearing out," made her stomach twist. She knew what that meant. She knew what happened to the ones nobody wanted. The lot was dusty and hot, the sun beating down on metal kennels that radiated heat like ovens. Emma walked slowly past each one, ignoring her father's sighs of impatience, her mother's murmured warnings about getting too attached. She stopped at a kennel near a German shepherd, Mix, who lay with his back to the crowd, his ribs visible through matted fur. Most people would have seen neglect. Emma saw something else. She saw the way his ears twitched when the auctioneer's voice rose, the way his paw flexed slightly when a truck door slammed, the way his breathing hitched, just barely, when someone walked too close. "He's not blind," she whispered to herself. Her father overheard. The auctioneer said he might be, honey. And even if he's not, look at him. He's shut down. A dog like that, it's a lot of work. A lot of heartbreak. Emma crouched in front of the kennel, her small fingers curling around the chain link. "Dade," she said quietly, "what if nobody shuts down? What if they just stop hoping?" Her father opened his mouth to respond, but the words died when he saw his daughter's face. It wasn't stubbornness. It wasn't a child's whim. It was something older, something that made his chest ache because he recognized it. Compassion that didn't ask for logic. The auctioneer's voice cut through the moment. "Last call. Shepherd Mix, approximately 2 years old, possible blindness, no bite history. Starting bid $20. Silence stretched across the lot like a held breath. Emma stood, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her mother's hand landed gently on her shoulder. "Emma, sweetheart, we can't save them all." "I'm not trying to save them all," Emma said, her voice trembling but firm. "Just him." Her father exhaled slowly, looking from his daughter to the dog who still hadn't moved. He saw the scaring, the hollowness, the 1,000-yard stare of an animal who'd seen too much. Every practical bone in his body screamed no. But then he remembered something. Years ago, his own father had brought home a 3-legged cat nobody wanted. His mother had protested. His siblings had laughed. But that cat had lived 16 years purring on his father's lap every single night. And when it finally died, his father had wept like a child. Sometimes, his father had said, the broken ones teach us the most about being whole. He looked down at Emma, at the hope radiating from her like sunlight. And he sighed the sigh of a man who knew he was about to make a beautiful mistake. "I'll take him." Emma called out, her voice small but unwavering. The auctioneer paused, gavel hovering. "Sweetheart, that dog's likely blind." "He won't." "I don't care," Emma interrupted, surprising herself with her own boldness. "He doesn't have to see me. I see him." A ripple of murmurs spread through the small crowd. Someone laughed. Someone else muttered about wasted money. But Emma didn't hear them, because in that moment, the dog lifted his head. Not much, just a fraction. Just enough for his dark, distant eyes to sweep across the lot and land for the briefest second on her. And in that second, Emma saw something that made her heart shatter and soar all at once. She saw a flicker, a spark buried so deep beneath layers of trauma and survival that it had almost been extinguished. But it was there, waiting, hoping, despite everything, to be found. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice thick. "All right, baby. Let's bring him home." The auctioneer banged his gavel, the sound echoing across the dusty lot like a door opening. And as they loaded him into the back of their station wagon, Emma whispered through the kennel bars, "You're safe now. I promise, you're safe." The car ride was silent except for the hum of tires on asphalt and Emma's occasional whispered reassurances. He lay in the crate, eyes open but unfocused, watching the world blur past through metal bars, trees, houses, sky, all of it meaningless. When they pulled into the driveway of a 2-story house with blue trim and a wraparound porch, Emma's mother turned in her seat. "John, are you sure about this?" Her father didn't answer immediately. He stared at the crate in the rearview mirror, at the dog who hadn't moved an inch. "No," he admitted. "But I'm sure about her." Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and laundry detergent. The other two dogs, a beagle mix named Toby and a terrier named Scout, rushed to investigate, tails wagging, noses working overtime. He stood stiffly in the entryway, letting them sniff, giving nothing back. Emma knelt beside him, her hand hovering near his head but not touching. "It's okay," she whispered. "They're nice. Everyone here is nice." He didn't react. Her father set up a bed in the corner of the living room, a thick cushion with a fleece blanket. Emma filled a bowl with fresh water and set it nearby. Her mother prepared a small meal, plain chicken and rice, easy on a stomach that had known too much neglect. They placed it in front of him. He stared at it. Didn't eat, didn't drink, just stood a statue in the middle of their warm, noisy, loving home. The first week was agony. Not for him, for them. Emma tried everything. She sat beside him for hours, reading aloud from her favorite books, her voice soft and steady. She showed him toys, squeaking them hopefully, rolling balls across the floor. She introduced him to every corner of the house, narrating like a tour guide. "This is the kitchen. Mom makes the best pancakes. This is the backyard. Toby dug a hole under the fence last summer, but Dad fixed it. This is my room. You can come in any time." He followed her mechanically, like a shadow without substance. He ate when food was placed in front of him, but only after everyone left the room. He drank water in the dead of night when the house was silent. He never wagged his tail, never made a sound, never looked anyone in the eye. Emma's mother grew concerned. "Maybe he's too damaged, John. Maybe we should consider—" "Don't," Emma said sharply, startling them both. Tears welled in her eyes. "Don't say it. He just needs time." But doubt crept in, even for her. Late at night, she lay in bed and wondered if love was enough, if kindness could undo what cruelty had carved so deep. Then small things began to shift. On the 9th day, Emma was reading on the couch when she felt weight beside her. Not touching, just near. She glanced over. He had climbed onto the opposite end of the couch, curled tightly facing away. But he was there. She smiled through tears and kept reading. On the 14th day, a thunderstorm rolled through. Emma woke to the sound of rain hammering the roof and lightning splitting the sky. She crept downstairs to check on him, and found him pressed into the corner, trembling violently, eyes wide and panicked. She didn't think. She just sat down beside him, cross-legged, and started humming. A lullaby her grandmother used to sing. Slowly, incrementally, his shaking eased. By the time the storm passed, his head was resting near her knee, not on it, but near. On the 21st day, Emma's father was fixing a squeaky door hinge when he dropped the screwdriver. It clattered loudly across the hardwood floor. The dog's head snapped up, eyes tracking the tool's trajectory with perfect precision. Their gazes met. The dog froze, Emma's father froze. And then, slowly, the dog lowered his head again, as if pretending the moment hadn't happened. But it had. Emma's father said nothing. He finished the repair, cleaned up, and walked into the kitchen where his wife was chopping vegetables. "He's not blind," he said quietly. "I know," she replied, not looking up. "Emma knows too." "Then why?" "Because he needs to tell us when he's ready." That night, Emma sat on the floor beside his bed, a book open in her lap. She read about a boy who learned to fly, about adventures in far-off lands, about courage that came not from strength, but from choosing to try even when you're terrified. The dog lay with his head on his paws, eyes half closed. And when Emma reached the part where the boy finally believed he could soar, she felt something warm and wet against her hand. She looked down. His nose, pressed gently against her palm. Not nudging, not asking, just there, connecting. She didn't move, didn't speak, just let the moment exist, fragile and perfect and full of more hope than she'd felt in weeks. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent, covering the world in white. Inside, a girl and a broken dog sat together in the glow of a reading lamp. And for the first time since the old woman died, he let himself remember what warmth felt like. Not all of it, but enough, just enough to keep going. December arrived with the kind of cold that turned breath into clouds and made the world feel suspended in crystal. Emma's school let out for winter break, and her parents surprised her with a weekend trip to the mountains. A small town 3 hours north was hosting its annual winter fair, complete with ice skating, hot chocolate stands, and a massive Christmas tree in the town square. "Can he come?" Emma asked immediately, pointing to the dog who now responded to the name she'd given him, August. Named for the month when things grew, when life returned. Her father hesitated. "Honey, he's still adjusting." "A crowded fair, all that noise, police," Emma said, and there was something in her voice, some intuition she couldn't name, that made him relent. "All right. But he stays on a leash, and if he gets stressed, we bring him back to the hotel." Emma threw her arms around his neck. "Thank you, Daddy, thank you." The drive was peaceful. Snow-dusted pines lined the highway, and the sun glinted off icy branches like scattered diamonds. August sat in the back seat beside Emma, his body tense but not panicked. She kept one hand resting lightly on his shoulder, a steady anchor. When they arrived, the town looked like something from a postcard. Strings of white lights crisscrossed the main street. Storefronts glowed with warm yellow light. The smell of roasted chestnuts and cinnamon drifted through the air. Families bundled in scarves and mittens wandered from stall to stall, their laughter mingling with holiday music crackling from old speakers. Emma's mother bought them all hot chocolate. Her father won Emma a stuffed penguin from a ring toss game. And August walked beside them, his ears swiveling at every sound, his eyes, though he tried to hide it, taking in everything. The fair sprawled across the town square and down to the frozen lake at its edge. A temporary ice rink had been set up, surrounded by wooden benches and heat lamps. Children wobbled on skates, holding their parents' hands. Teenagers raced each other, laughing when they fell. Emma tugged her father's sleeve. "Can I skate? Just for a little bit?" Her mother glanced at August. "What about him?" "I'll stay with him," her father offered. "You two go ahead." Emma hesitated, looking down at August. "Will you be okay?" He didn't respond, of course, but he sat, calm and still, and something in his posture felt steady. Emma kissed the top of his head and ran toward the rink with her mother. Her father found a bench near the edge of the lake, away from the crowds. August sat beside him, his gaze distant but not empty. "You know," her father said quietly, "I didn't think this would work. Thought you'd be too far gone." He paused, watching Emma glide across the ice, her arms spread wide, her smile brighter than the lights overhead. "But my kid sees things I don't. She always has." August's ear twitched. Emma waved from the rink, and her father waved back. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The temperature dropped sharply, and the crowd began to thin. Parents called their children off the ice. Vendors started packing up their stalls. Emma skated toward the far edge of the rink, where the ice stretched out onto the natural lake. Her mother called after her, "Not too far, sweetie." Emma laughed, spinning in a circle. "I'm fine, Mom." Just one more. The sound was subtle at first, a soft crack like a branch snapping underfoot. Emma stopped mid-spin, her smile faltering. She looked down. The ice beneath her feet was webbed with thin, dark lines. Her mother's scream cut through the cold air like a blade. The ice gave way. 1 second, Emma was standing. The next, she was gone, swallowed by black water so cold it stole the breath from her lungs. Chaos erupted. Her mother ran toward the edge, slipping on the ice. Her father bolted from the bench, shouting Emma's name. Skaters scrambled to safety. Someone yelled for rope. Someone else screamed for help. And August stood frozen, his body rigid, his mind fractured into 1,000 jagged pieces. He saw the old woman's face, her hand going cold beneath his nose. He felt the weight of every moment he'd failed, every time he'd looked away, every second he'd convinced himself that seeing led to losing. The water churned. Emma's hand broke the surface, fingers grasping at nothing. Time slowed. The world narrowed to a single choice. Look away, stay safe, survive, or see, and risk everything. Again, his paws moved before his mind could stop them. He ran. He didn't think. Thinking was the enemy. Thinking meant remembering. Remembering meant stopping. And if he stopped, she would disappear beneath the black water, and he would lose someone again. He couldn't lose someone again. His paws hit the ice with force, claws scrabbling for purchase on the slick surface. Behind him, Emma's father screamed his name. No, but the sound was distant, muffled, as if the world had wrapped itself in cotton. All he could hear was the pounding of his own heart. All he could see was the hole in the ice. dark and gaping like a wound. Emma's hand appeared again, fingers splayed, desperate. Her face broke the surface for a fraction of a second, lips blue, eyes wide with terror. She gasped, choked, and went under again. He ran harder. The ice groaned beneath his weight, spider web cracks spreading outward from each step. Somewhere in the back of his mind, instinct screamed at him to stop, to turn back. But he silenced it with a single thought: not again. Not again. Not again. He reached the edge of the hole and skidded to a stop, his claws catching the lip of broken ice. The water was a writhing void, impossibly dark despite the light strung overhead. He could see her shape beneath the surface, pale and thrashing, sinking. Without hesitation, he plunged his head into the water. The cold was a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs, turning his muscles to stone. His jaws snapped blindly, searching, and then fabric. He bit down hard on the sleeve of Emma's coat and pulled. She was heavier than he expected, waterlogged and barely conscious, but he braced his hind legs and hauled backward with every ounce of strength he had. The ice cracked again. Louder this time. A jagged line split the surface between him and the shore. Emma's father was crawling toward them now, flat on his stomach, distributing his weight, reaching with desperate hands. "Hold on, baby! Hold on!" August pulled again, his teeth aching, his neck straining. Emma's head broke the surface, water streaming from her hair, her mouth opening in a silent gasp. Her eyes found his, and in that moment he saw her, really saw her, not as a stranger, not as another person who would leave, but as the girl who had sat beside him in thunderstorms. The girl who had whispered that he didn't have to see her because she saw him. The girl who had given him a name that meant growth. The ice beneath his hind legs gave way. He felt himself sliding backward, felt the cold water rising over his haunches, but he didn't let go. He locked his jaw tighter and scrambled, claws tearing at the ice, and with one final, desperate lunge, he threw his weight backward. Emma came with him, her body sliding out of the hole and onto the ice. Her father grabbed her immediately, dragging her the rest of the way to safety, while her mother sobbed and wrapped her in a blanket someone had thrown from the shore. But August was still in the water. His front paws clung to the edge of the ice, but his back legs kicked uselessly in the void. The cold was everywhere now, seeping into his bones, slowing his movements. He tried to pull himself up, but his strength was gone. The ice crumbled under his claws. He slipped an inch, then another. Emma's father spun around, saw him struggling, and lunged forward. "Grab my hand," someone shouted. "Form a chain." 3 men linked arms, creating a human rope, and Emma's father crawled forward, reaching, until his hands closed around August's collar. "I've got you, boy. I've got you." He pulled, and the men behind him pulled, and inch by agonizing inch, August was dragged out of the water and onto solid ice. They carried him to the shore wrapped in blankets, his body shaking so violently it looked like a seizure. Paramedics were already there, checking Emma's vitals, but she pushed them away, crawling on her hands and knees to where August lay. "August," she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. "August, please." He opened his eyes, not halfway, not hidden, fully, and he looked at her, really looked. Let her see the fear and the pain and the love that he'd buried so deep he thought it was gone. Emma's tears fell hot against his cold fur. "You saved me," she choked out. "You saw me." Her father knelt beside them, his hand resting on August's head, his own eyes wet. "Good boy," he said, his voice breaking. "Good boy, you're not broken. You never were." Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone brought more blankets. Someone else started a fire in a metal drum. But August didn't hear any of it, because for the first time since the old woman died, he let himself feel. Not the cold, not the pain, but the warmth of a hand on his head, the sound of a girl crying because he lived. The knowledge that he had chosen to see. And it hadn't destroyed him, it had saved them both. The ambulance ride was a blur of motion and noise. EMTs worked over Emma with practiced efficiency, checking her temperature, her breathing, wrapping heated blankets around her small frame. August lay on the floor beside the gurney, too exhausted to move, but refusing to be separated. Every time someone tried to remove him, Emma's hand would reach down, fingers tangling in his damp fur, and the EMTs would relent. "Let him stay," one of them said quietly. "He's the reason she's alive." Emma's mother sat on the opposite bench, her face pale and streaked with tears. She couldn't stop staring at August, at the way his eyes stayed open now, alert and watchful despite his trembling. Her husband climbed in last, his pants soaked to the knees, his jacket draped over Emma. He met August's gaze and something passed between them. An understanding. A silent acknowledgement of the line that had been crossed. The dog had stopped pretending, and the man had stopped doubting. At the hospital, they were rushed into the emergency room. Nurses descended on Emma, peeling away her wet clothes, wrapping her in blankets that had been heated in industrial warmers. A doctor barked orders about IV fluids and core temperature monitoring. Emma's parents hovered, helpless and terrified, answering questions in broken fragments. Oxygen levels are low but rising. She's going to be okay. The words hit like a physical force. Emma's mother collapsed into her husband's arms, sobbing with relief. August was examined in a separate room. A veterinary technician who happened to be on shift checked him over, her hands gentle but thorough. Mild hypothermia, she announced. No water in the lungs. Vitals are strong, he's a fighter. You have no idea, Emma's father murmured. They were allowed to see Emma an hour later. She was in a small recovery room, propped up in bed, an IV taped to her arm and a heated blanket tucked around her. Her lips were still pale, but her eyes were bright, and when August was led in on a leash, her face crumpled with joy. August? He crossed the room in 3 strides and placed his head on the edge of her bed. She buried her face in his fur, her small body shaking with sobs. You saved me. You saved me. Her father stood in the doorway, watching the scene through blurred vision. A nurse approached him quietly. The doctor said it was the dog who pulled her out. He nodded, unable to speak. That's remarkable. Most dogs wouldn't have the instinct, especially not one with trauma. He's not most dogs, Emma's mother said softly. She stepped forward and placed a hand on August's head. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for bringing her back. That night, while Emma slept under medical observation, her parents sat in the hospital cafeteria nursing cold coffee. I almost said no, her father admitted, his voice hollow. At the auction, I almost walked away. But you didn't. Because of Emma, because she saw something I couldn't. He paused, staring into his cup. I thought he was too broken to be saved. Turns out, he wasn't the one who needed saving. His wife reached across the table and took his hand. Maybe we all did. Emma was discharged the next morning. The doctor gave them strict instructions about rest and warmth and follow-up appointments, but her prognosis was excellent. No lasting damage, no complications. A miracle, the doctor called it, though everyone in the room knew the miracle had 4 legs and a pair of eyes that had finally chosen to see. The drive home was quiet. Emma dozed in the back seat, August curled beside her, his head resting on her lap. Every few minutes, her hand would move in her sleep, fingers combing through his fur. Her father glanced in the rearview mirror and felt his throat tighten. She was right about him, he said. She's right about a lot of things. His wife replied. When they pulled into the driveway, Toby and Scout barked excitedly from the front window. Emma stirred, blinking awake, and smiled. We're home. August lifted his head, and for the first time, he looked at the house not as a place he was trapped, but as a place he belonged. Emma's father opened the car door and August jumped out, waiting as Emma climbed down carefully, still wrapped in a blanket. She took his leash but didn't pull, just walked beside him. Together, they climbed the porch steps. And when the front door opened, warm light spilling out into the cold winter evening, August walked inside without hesitation. No longer hiding, no longer afraid, just home. 3 days after the incident, a call came from the hospital. Not about Emma, who was recovering beautifully at home, but about the incident itself. A detective wanted to speak with the family. Standard procedure, they were told, for any water rescue involving a minor. Emma's father agreed, though unease prickled at the back of his neck. The detective arrived on a gray afternoon, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a worn leather notebook. She introduced herself as Detective Sarah Chen and accepted the offer of coffee with a grateful nod. I want to start by saying Emma is incredibly lucky, she began, settling into the armchair across from Emma's parents. What happened at that lake? Most children don't survive that long in water that cold. We know, Emma's mother said quietly. Well, thank God every day. And your dog, Detective Chen added, glancing toward August, who lay near the fireplace. The witnesses I spoke to said he reacted before anyone else, that he ran onto the ice while people were still processing what happened. Emma's father nodded. He did. That's unusual behavior, Chen continued, her tone carefully neutral, especially for a dog with his history. The room went still. His history. Emma's mother repeated slowly. Detective Chen flipped open her notebook. When I ran his description through our database, a flag came up. There was a fight ring busted about 8 months ago, 2 counties over. Several dogs were seized. Most were euthanized due to extreme aggression, but a few were deemed salvageable and sent to shelters. She paused, meeting their eyes. One of them matches August's scars and approximate age. Emma, who had been sitting on the stairs listening, stood abruptly. He was in a fight ring. Her voice was small, horrified. We believe so, Chen said gently. And if that's the case, then what he did at the lake is even more extraordinary. Dogs trained for fighting are taught to override their natural instincts. Saving a drowning child requires not just courage, but trust, empathy, and quick decision-making. Most fight dogs lose that capacity. Emma's father leaned forward. Are you saying he shouldn't have saved her? I'm saying, Chen replied carefully, that he chose to. Against every trauma he endured. Against all his conditioning, he chose her. Silence settled over the room like snow. Emma walked slowly to August and sat beside him. He lifted his head, and for the first time in front of strangers he didn't look away. He held Detective Chen's gaze, steady and calm. There's one more thing, Chen said. The shelter August came from noted possible blindness. But the lake footage. Emma's mother interrupted. The fair had security cameras. We reviewed them as part of the investigation. And Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Thompson, your dog is not blind. She turned her laptop around, showing a paused video frame. August mid-run, his eyes clearly focused on the hole in the ice. He tracks movement with precision. He assessed the ice conditions. He calculated his approach. That's not a blind dog. That's a dog who is pretending. Emma's fought it back, exhaling slowly. We knew. Chen blinked. You knew. Wu suspected. He corrected. But we never pushed. We figured he'd tell us when he was ready. Emma spoke up, her voice stronger now. He stopped pretending the moment I went under. He chose to see because he chose to save me. Detective Chen closed her laptop, a small smile tugging at her lips. Then this is the end of my investigation. What you have here isn't a liability. It's a miracle in fur. After she left, the family sat together in the living room. Emma curled up beside August, her head resting on his shoulder. Why did you pretend? She whispered. August didn't answer, of course. But Emma's father did. Because seeing meant caring, and caring meant he could get hurt again. He reached out, scratching behind August's ear. But he cared anyway. He saw you anyway. Because some things are worth the risk. Emma's mother wiped her eyes. What do we do now? Now, her father said, looking at the dog who had become so much more than a rescue. Now we make sure he never has to pretend again. Emma wrapped her arms around August's neck. You don't have to hide anymore, she whispered. I see you. And I'm not going anywhere. August's tail gave a single, deliberate thump against the floor. It wasn't much. But it was everything. Because for the first time since the old woman called him son, he believed it. He belonged. He was safe. He was seen. And this time, seeing didn't mean losing. It meant being found. Spring came slowly that year, melting the snow in uneven patches and coaxing the first green shoots from the thawed earth. Emma returned to school with a story that made her a legend among her classmates. The girl saved by her dog. The dog who wasn't blind but chose to be. The miracle on the ice. But inside the Thompson house, life settled into something quieter, something sacred. August no longer slept in the corner. He slept at the foot of Emma's bed, his breathing synchronized with hers, his dreams no longer filled with chains and concrete, but with gardens and gentle hands. He played with Toby and Scout, at first tentatively, then with growing confidence. He learned that a wagging tail didn't mean a threat was coming. That raised voices could be laughter instead of anger. That food would come again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Emma's father built him a special place on the porch, a cushioned bench with a view of the backyard, where rabbits sometimes grazed in the early morning. August would sit there for hours, watching the world with eyes that no longer hid. Seeing everything. Remembering nothing that could hurt anymore. One evening in late April, Emma sat beside him with a book in her lap. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. She read aloud, her voice steady and warm, and August listened with his head resting on her knee. When she finished the chapter, she closed the book and looked at him. "Do you remember her?" she asked softly. "The woman who had you first?" August's ear twitched. "I think you do," Emma continued. "And I think she'd be happy that you found us, that you're safe." She paused, her fingers tracing the scars on his shoulder, faded now but still visible. "I think she'd be proud of you." August turned his head and looked at Emma fully, not with the guarded glance of a dog who expected pain, but with the open gaze of one who had finally learned that love didn't always end in loss. That night, the whole family gathered in the living room. Emma's father lit a fire, and her mother made popcorn. They watched an old movie, the kind with happy endings and orchestral music, and August lay sprawled across the rug, surrounded by the people who had refused to give up on him. At some point, Emma slid off the couch and curled up beside him, her head resting on his side. "You know what?" her father said quietly, watching them. "I was wrong about broken things." "Hoso," his wife asked. "I used to think broken things needed to be fixed. But maybe they don't. Maybe they just need to be seen." Emma's mother smiled, her eyes soft, and loved. And given time, Emma added without opening her eyes. August's tail thumped once against the floor. Outside the world turned, seasons changed. People came and went. But inside that house, in the glow of firelight and the warmth of presence, a dog who had once chosen blindness finally understood the truth. Seeing wasn't the problem. It never had been. The problem was what he'd been forced to see. But here, in this home with these people, there was nothing to fear in looking. Only love. Only safety. Only the quiet, unshakable knowledge that he was exactly where he belonged. Years later, when Emma graduated high school, August was there. Gray around the muzzle, slower in his step, but there. When she left for college, he waited by the door every weekend until she came home. And when she finally returned for good, degree in veterinary medicine in hand and a dream of opening a rescue shelter in her heart, August was still there. Older, wiser, still seeing. "You inspired all of this, you know," Emma told him one afternoon as they sat together in the backyard of her new clinic. The sign above the door read, "Second Sight Animal Rescue, because every animal deserves to be seen." August, now white-faced and dignified, rested his head on her lap. She scratched behind his ears, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "Thank you for choosing to see me. Thank you for teaching me to see others." He looked up at her with eyes that held a lifetime, and in that gaze was everything. Forgiveness, healing, the unspoken truth that love, real love, was always worth the risk of seeing, always worth the choice to hope, even when the world had taught you to look away. Because some things, some people, some moments, they're meant to be witnessed. And the ones who save us are often the ones we thought needed saving most. If this story moved you even a little, don't leave quietly. Like this video so more people can see August's journey. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story that might change your heart, and share it with someone who still believes in second chances. And before you go, tell me in the comments, if you were standing at that auction, with everyone else walking away, would you have raised your hand?